I watched every guest stand as the music began. Then I looked at the front row. Every seat reserved for my family was empty. A few minutes later, my mother texted me that they had skipped my wedding for my brother's soccer game. I believed it. Until I discovered there had never been a soccer game at all. If you think that was the worst part, you're wrong. Because what I uncovered afterward destroyed everything I thought I knew about my own family. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and let me know in the comments what you would have done if you were in my place. The morning of my wedding should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, I remember counting empty chairs. My name is Elodie Ricci, and if you had met me a year before that day, you probably would have called me lucky. I owned a successful architectural design firm in Portland, Oregon. I had spent years working long nights, taking impossible deadlines, and slowly building a business that people finally respected. More importantly, I was about to marry Graham, the kind of man who never made promises he couldn't keep. For months, our wedding had become the center of my family's conversations. My mother insisted on helping choose the flowers. My father argued over the seating arrangement, even though nobody had asked him to. My younger brother, Micah, joked that he expected an open dessert bar because he was giving up an entire weekend during soccer season. Even my older cousin, Soren Vailcrest, volunteered to keep the family organized, something everyone praised because Soren always appeared responsible. Looking back now, I wish I had questioned why he was so eager. But at the time I didn't. 3 days before the ceremony, everything still felt perfectly normal. I spent the afternoon walking through the vineyard venue just outside Portland with our wedding planner, Naomi Crossfield. The weather forecast looked perfect. The musicians had already rehearsed. The catering staff moved quietly between tables while arranging glassware that sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. Naomi smiled as she checked another item off her clipboard. I honestly don't think I've ever seen a wedding this organized. I laughed. Then you haven't met my family. She grinned. Oh. My mom has called me 6 times today. Only 6. Give her another hour. We both laughed, and for a moment I felt completely relaxed. Everything was ready. Or so I believed. That evening, my mother called again. She sounded unusually distracted. How are things there? Perfect. Good. Her voice drifted for a second before returning. Soren has been helping everyone coordinate tomorrow. That's nice of him. It really is. I didn't think twice about it. After all, Soren had always loved being involved in family events. Birthdays, holidays, reunions. If there was a gathering, somehow he always became the unofficial organizer. It seemed harmless. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The bridal suite overlooked rows of vineyards covered in soft morning fog. Makeup artists arrived just after 7. Bridesmaids filled the room with nervous excitement, while music played quietly through a portable speaker. Everyone kept saying the same thing. You look amazing. You must be so excited. I can't believe today's finally here. I smiled every time. Inside though, I was mostly relieved. Months of planning were finally ending. Around 9 o'clock, I checked my phone. No messages from my parents. That wasn't unusual. They had promised to arrive early because my father wanted photographs before guests filled the venue. At 10, Graham sent me a photo from outside. His entire family had already arrived. My future mother-in-law stood beside the entrance greeting relatives. My phone remained silent. They're probably on the road, one bridesmaid said. I nodded. Probably. At 10:30, Naomi entered the bridal suite. There might be a little delay. What kind of delay? Your family hasn't checked in yet. I frowned. They should have been here by now. I've tried calling the number your mother gave us. No answer. She shook her head. Straight to voicemail. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Not panic. Not yet. Just confusion. I called my mom. No answer. I called Dad. Nothing. Micah. Voicemail. Even my aunt didn't pick up. The room slowly became quieter. Nobody wanted to say what everyone was beginning to think. 11 o'clock. Guests filled almost every seat. The music began. Graham waited near the ceremony arch. Still no family. Naomi leaned toward me. We can delay another 15 minutes. Do it. She nodded. Those 15 minutes felt longer than the previous 6 months. Every few moments I looked toward the entrance. Every car that approached made my heart race. Every car belonged to someone else. Finally, my phone vibrated. Mom. Relief washed over me. I answered immediately. Instead of hearing her voice, I saw a text message. We're so sorry. Micah's regional soccer championship changed locations this morning. The family decided we had to support him. We'll celebrate with you later. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. Nothing about it made sense. Micah never mentioned a regional championship. Not once. Not during dinner. Not during rehearsals. Not during any phone calls. He had been talking about attending my wedding all month. Why would a championship suddenly appear on the morning of my ceremony? And why would every single member of my family decide not to tell me until the wedding had already started? I looked toward the ceremony space through the window. One entire section remained empty. Every seat reserved for my family. Empty. Graham walked inside after Naomi quietly signaled him. He didn't ask questions. He simply took my hand. We can wait longer. I looked at the clock. Then at the guests. Then back at him. I slowly shook my head. No. You sure? If they're choosing not to come. I stopped myself. Then I won't make everyone else wait. He squeezed my hand. We're getting married today. I forced a smile. Yes. A few minutes later, the music started again. The doors opened. I began walking down the aisle. Every step felt heavier than the last. Not because I doubted marrying Graham. Because every empty chair reminded me that my own family had chosen somewhere else to be. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. There had to be. I just didn't know that the message about Micah's soccer game was only the first lie. And before long, I would discover that nobody in my family had actually gone to a soccer field at all. The weeks after our wedding passed in a strange blur. People always imagine that once the ceremony is over, life settles into something peaceful. For Graham and me, it was the opposite. We had just returned from a short honeymoon along the Oregon coast, but every happy memory seemed to have an invisible shadow hanging over it. No matter how many times I looked through our wedding photos, my eyes always landed on the same thing. The empty rows. My photographer had done everything she could to crop around them. She changed angles, brought guests closer together, and focused on emotional moments instead of wide shots. She was talented, but she couldn't erase reality. One evening, Graham found me staring at our wedding album again. You've been looking at the same page for 20 minutes. I know. He sat beside me on the couch. You don't have to pretend you're okay. I just don't understand. He stayed quiet. My parents raised me to believe family always comes first. They probably think they did the right thing. I laughed bitterly. They skipped their daughter's wedding. I know. For a soccer game. He looked at me carefully before answering. Does that actually sound like something your family would do? His question stayed with me long after we went to bed. Because the answer was, no, not really. My parents had attended every graduation, every birthday, every important milestone in my life. Even when money was tight years ago, they somehow managed to show up. Missing my wedding for a soccer match didn't fit who they had always been. Unless someone had convinced them it was necessary. A few days later, I called my mother. She sounded unusually cheerful. Hi, sweetheart. We need to talk. A pause. About the wedding? Yes. We already apologized. No, Mom. I need to understand. Silence. Then she sighed. We really thought Micah needed us. I've asked Micah. Another pause. What did he say? He said almost nothing, because he hasn't answered my calls. I'm sure he's busy. Busy. That was becoming everyone's favorite excuse. After we hung up, I tried calling my father. Straight to voicemail. Again. By the end of the week, I had spoken to almost every relative who missed my wedding. Every conversation sounded strangely similar. We're sorry. It was complicated. We'll explain someday. Not one person actually explained anything. It was as if everyone had memorized the same script. That bothered me more than their absence. Then, nearly 3 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang while I was leaving a client meeting downtown. Micah. I answered before the second ring. Hey. His voice sounded nervous. Can we meet? I've been trying to reach you. I know. When? Today. Where? The coffee shop near Riverside Park. I'll be there. An hour later, I spotted him sitting alone near the back corner. He looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. He stood as soon as I approached. I'm sorry. I folded my arms. So am I. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Finally, he sat back down. I wanted to come. I frowned. What? I wanted to be at your wedding. I blinked. What do you mean? I wasn't given a choice. Every word made less sense than the last. You told Mom there was a championship. His eyebrows shot upward. What championship? The regional soccer championship. He stared at me, then slowly shook his head. There wasn't one. I felt the air leave my lungs. What? There wasn't any tournament. I leaned forward. Micah, don't joke about this. I'm not joking. He rubbed both hands together nervously. My season ended almost 2 weeks before your wedding. I couldn't speak. The silence stretched between us. Finally I whispered. Then where were all of you? He looked down at the table. Soren called everyone. My heartbeat quickened. He said Grandpa's investment was in danger. I frowned. What investment? I don't know. He told Mom and Dad there was an emergency meeting. I listened without interrupting. He said lawyers were involved. He said the paperwork had to be signed immediately. He kept saying if everyone didn't show up, Grandpa could lose everything. I shook my head. My grandparents have been retired for years. I know that now. Then why didn't anyone question him? Micah looked embarrassed. Because he sounded convincing. That sounded exactly like Soren. Confident. Calm. Always speaking as though he already knew more than everyone else. What happened when you got there? Micah sighed. We drove all over town. Why? Soren kept saying the meeting location changed. Then? We went to another office. And? It was closed. I stared at him. He blamed the attorneys. What happened next? He said someone had forgotten important documents. So everyone got back into their cars. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You spent the whole day driving around? He nodded. For hours. Nobody stopped him? Every time someone questioned him, he had another explanation. What about you? I kept asking when I could leave. And? He said the family needed to stay together. The more Micah spoke, the stranger everything became. What time did everyone finally realize something was wrong? He checked his memory. It was late afternoon. My wedding had already ended. He nodded slowly. Yes. And then? We asked Soren where the meeting actually was. What did he say? He claimed the investors cancelled. Just like that. Just like that. I leaned back in my chair. None of it sounded accidental. It sounded rehearsed. Planned. Carefully planned. Did anyone get angry? Oh, they were furious. Then why didn't they call me? Micah swallowed. Because Soren told everyone not to. I stared at him. He said you'd already be upset. He said calling would only ruin your honeymoon. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. He told everyone to wait until things calmed down. And they listened? Micah nodded. They trusted him. I looked out the cafe window, toward the park across the street. Children kicked soccer balls across the grass. Parents cheered from folding chairs. An ordinary Saturday. An ordinary game. The exact kind of game my family claimed was more important than my wedding. Except, there had never been a game. Not even one. I turned back toward Micah. Why are you telling me this now? His face grew serious. Because yesterday I overheard Mom and Dad arguing. What about? They realized Soren lied. My pulse quickened again. How? They found out Grandpa never asked for any investment meeting. I sat perfectly still. So everyone was tricked. Yes. But that's not the part that scared me. What do you mean? Micah hesitated. Then he quietly said the sentence that changed everything. I heard Dad ask Soren one question. What question? Why was it so important to keep us away from Elodie's wedding? I felt a chill run through my body. Because that wasn't the question anyone had asked before. Not why he lied. Not why he invented a meeting. But why he needed my entire family somewhere else. For the first time, I stopped wondering whether Soren had manipulated everyone. Instead, I started wondering what had been happening at my wedding that he had been so desperate for my family not to witness. After my conversation with Micah, I stopped thinking like a hurt daughter. I started thinking like an architect. My job had taught me that every structure leaves evidence. If something doesn't make sense on the surface, you don't guess. You follow the details until the truth reveals itself. Someone had invested time and effort into keeping my family away from my wedding. That wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a plan. The question was simple. Why? The following Monday, I drove to Ashland to visit my grandparents. They had been unusually quiet since the wedding, only calling once to apologize without offering many details. When I arrived, my grandmother, Lucia, greeted me with a long hug that lasted much longer than usual. I'm so glad you came. So am I. She looked tired. Older. As if the past few weeks had weighed on her more than she wanted to admit. We sat together in her kitchen while she prepared tea. For several minutes we talked about ordinary things. The weather. My business. Married life with Graham. Neither of us mentioned the wedding. Eventually, she placed a teacup on the table. I'm ashamed. I looked up. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Her voice cracked. I should have walked away the moment things stopped making sense. What happened that day? She stared out the kitchen window. Soren kept saying every delay was normal. She sighed. He always had another excuse. The lawyer is late. The investors changed buildings. The documents are being delivered. It never ended. I nodded. Micah told me. She slowly reached toward a nearby cabinet. I actually have something for you. She removed a large cream-colored envelope that had already been opened. This came here by mistake. She handed it to me. It was addressed to you. I frowned. My address is correct. It arrived here because years ago you used ours for some legal paperwork. I turned the envelope over. The return address belonged to a law firm in Portland. I recognized the name immediately. Harper and Ellison Estate Attorneys. Confused, I opened the folder inside. The first page contained legal documents. The second included property records. The third made my heart stop. My grandfather quietly watched my expression. I never wanted you to learn about it like this. I looked up. What is this? He folded his hands together. When your grandmother and I updated our estate several years ago, we made a decision. I scanned the paperwork again. Commercial properties. Warehouse buildings. Office space. Land. My name appeared over and over. I don't understand. You inherited majority ownership. I stared at him. No. Yes. But Mom and Dad. They each received different assets. You received the business properties. I looked from one document to another. The estimated value was staggering. This has to be a mistake. It isn't. My grandfather spoke quietly. We believed you were the only grandchild interested in preserving the family's investments. I couldn't process what I was reading. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because the transfer wasn't supposed to become active until after your marriage. I looked back at the first page. There it was. A clause I had overlooked. Ownership would automatically transfer after legal confirmation of my marriage. A cold feeling settled in my chest. I remembered something Micah had said. Why was it so important to keep us away from Elodie's wedding? I whispered the words almost to myself. Because of this. Grandpa frowned. What? I slowly explained everything. The fake investment meeting. The imaginary soccer championship. Soren leading everyone around all day. Every detail. By the time I finished, my grandmother had covered her mouth with one hand. My grandfather didn't say a word for nearly a full minute. Finally, he spoke. He knew. You think so? I never discussed these documents with the rest of the family. Then how would he know? I honestly don't know. Silence filled the kitchen. Then another memory surfaced. About 6 months before the wedding, Soren had offered to help organize old family paperwork after my grandparents downsized into a smaller home. Boxes. Files. Legal folders. He had spent an entire weekend sorting documents. At the time, everyone praised him for volunteering. Now, that memory felt completely different. Grandpa seemed to realize the same thing. He was alone in my office for hours. Neither of us needed to say what we were thinking. If confidential papers had been left on a desk, if estate files had been opened, if Soren had been curious, he might have discovered everything. Still, one question remained. What would he gain? Grandpa answered before I finished asking. Time. I looked at him. If your marriage became legally complicated, he could challenge the transfer. Exactly. I leaned back in my chair. So keeping the family away wasn't about hurting me. No, it was about creating doubt. Grandpa nodded slowly. If immediate family members weren't present, someone could attempt to argue procedural irregularities. It probably wouldn't succeed. But it could delay everything. Delay. That word echoed in my mind. Not stop. Delay. Long enough for negotiations. Long enough for legal pressure. Long enough to convince me to settle. Someone willing to manipulate an entire family over money would absolutely think that way. But suspicion wasn't proof. I needed evidence. Without evidence, all I had was a theory. As I gathered the papers back into the envelope, something slipped onto the floor. A folded sheet had been tucked between two legal documents. I bent down and picked it up. It wasn't part of the estate paperwork. It was a visitor sign-in log from the law firm's office. Apparently it had been included by mistake. Several names appeared on the page. Clients. Witnesses. Delivery services. Then one signature caught my eye. Soren Vailcrest. Date. For months before my wedding. Reason for visit. Document pickup. I frowned. Grandpa leaned closer. I never sent him there. My heartbeat quickened. Why would Soren visit the estate attorneys? Why would he collect documents? And more importantly, who had authorized it? For the first time since my wedding, I realized this wasn't just family manipulation anymore. Someone had reached into legal matters that should never have involved him. And if that visitor log was genuine, then somewhere inside Harper and Ellison, someone else had been helping Soren. I barely slept that night. The visitor log sat on my kitchen table beside the estate documents, and every time I looked at Soren's signature, the same question came back. Who let him into the law office? The next morning, I called Harper and Ellison. After being transferred twice, I finally reached the firm's office manager. My name is Elodie Ricci. I believe there may have been a mistake involving my family's estate documents. She asked me to come in that afternoon. By 2 o'clock, I was sitting inside a conference room overlooking downtown Portland. The office manager, Diane Mercer, placed several folders on the table. I've already reviewed your file. And? You're correct. She looked genuinely concerned. Mr. Vailcrest was never authorized to collect any documents. I slid the visitor log toward her. Then why is his name here? She adjusted her glasses before reading it. Her expression changed immediately. This shouldn't exist. What do you mean? This is an internal security log. So it's real? Yes. But the reason listed beside his name doesn't match our records. I frowned. What do your records show? That he requested directions. I blinked. Directions. Nothing more. So why does this copy say document pickup? She was silent for several moments. I don't know. That answer bothered her just as much as it bothered me. She excused herself and disappeared into another office. Nearly 20 minutes later, she returned with one more person. A senior partner named Charles Ellison. He shook my hand before taking a seat. Ms. Ricci, we need to verify something. He opened another folder. Our security system archives every visitor entering the building. He turned his computer monitor toward me. There are cameras covering the reception desk. My pulse quickened. If the footage still exists. It does. A few clicks later, the video appeared. The date matched the visitor log. There was Soren, perfectly dressed as always, smiling at the receptionist. I watched him sign the logbook. A receptionist greeted him. He waited several minutes. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of entering one of the conference rooms, a man wearing an employee badge walked into the lobby. The employee shook Soren's hand. The two disappeared through a staff-only hallway. Charles immediately paused the video. That's not supposed to happen. You know him? Unfortunately, yes. He enlarged the employee badge. The name became clear. Owen Carlyle, one of the firm's legal assistants. Charles leaned back in his chair. Owen never mentioned this meeting. My stomach tightened. So Soren wasn't acting alone. It certainly appears that way. Charles immediately contacted the firm's compliance department. Within an hour, they had interviewed Owen. He denied everything. He claimed Soren had only asked general questions about estate law. Nothing confidential. Nothing improper. The meeting had lasted less than 10 minutes. It sounded convincing. Until Charles requested the building's access records. Every employee badge recorded movements through secured doors. When the report arrived, Owen's story collapsed. His badge had opened the archive room. Not once. 3 separate times. The archive room contained confidential estate files, including my grandparents. Owen had lied. Before leaving the office, Charles apologized personally. If confidential information was accessed improperly, our firm will fully cooperate. I appreciate that. We're also placing Owen on administrative leave while we investigate. For the first time since my wedding, I felt as though the truth was finally beginning to move. But I still didn't know what Soren had actually done with the information. 2 days later, another surprise arrived. Naomi Crossfield called me. My wedding planner rarely sounded nervous. This time, she did. Elodie, I think I found something. What is it? I've been organizing storage from spring weddings. And I came across invoices connected to your ceremony. I frowned. Okay. One invoice wasn't ours. What do you mean? It wasn't billed to you. It was billed to Soren. That made no sense. Soren paid the venue? For something very specific. I drove to Naomi's office that evening. She handed me a photocopy. Private meeting room B. Reserved from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening. Date. My wedding day. The location. The same vineyard where Graham and I got married. I stared at the paper. He rented a room at my wedding venue? Naomi nodded. And he insisted on paying cash. Why? I don't know. She opened another folder. But I remembered something after seeing his name. She pulled out a handwritten note. Our venue manager wrote this after your wedding. I read it carefully. Guest repeatedly requested updates regarding ceremony schedule. I looked up. Guest. That was Soren. He wasn't even there. Naomi slowly shook her head. Oh, he was. Every muscle in my body stiffened. What are you talking about? He arrived early that morning. No. Yes. He never attended the ceremony. He stayed inside the private meeting room overlooking the parking lot. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He watched. He kept asking staff what time guests were arriving. What time the ceremony started. Whether your parents had checked in. When everyone entered. He seemed unusually interested. I felt sick. So while my family was driving around, because of his fake emergency, he was at your wedding venue. Naomi nodded. There was one more thing. She opened her laptop. The venue keeps security footage for insurance purposes. My heartbeat accelerated. Please tell me it's still there. It is. She pressed play. The camera overlooked the entrance road. At 10:12 that morning, Soren stepped outside carrying his phone. He made one call. Less than a minute later, another camera showed him pacing. Then he made a second call. 5 minutes later, no vehicles carrying my family arrived. Another call. Then another. Every time he checked his watch, he immediately called someone. Naomi paused the video. It looked strange at the time. I stared at the frozen image. Now it looked deliberate. Calculated. Almost like he was directing people from a distance. Then Naomi zoomed in on the timestamp. I already compared these times. Compared them with what? The phone records your parents voluntarily shared after they started questioning Soren. She handed me another sheet. Every outgoing call from Soren matched the moments he appeared on camera. He wasn't wondering where my family was. He was making sure they stayed away. As I sat there trying to process everything, Naomi quietly said something that neither of us had considered before. Elodie. I looked at her. If Soren spent your entire wedding monitoring, who showed up? She paused. What was he so afraid your family might see if they had actually walked through those doors? Naomi's question stayed in my mind all the way home. What was Soren afraid my family might see? Until that moment, I had believed his goal was simply to keep my parents away from the ceremony long enough to complicate my inheritance. Now it felt bigger than that. He hadn't just hidden my family. He had stayed at the venue himself. He had watched the entrances. He had monitored the schedule. He had called people over and over throughout the day. Someone who only wanted to delay paperwork wouldn't need to do any of that. Someone protecting another secret would. The next morning, Graham and I met with an attorney recommended by Hopper and Ellison. Her name was Vivian Locke. She specialized in civil fraud cases. After listening to everything, she leaned back in her chair. Your cousin made one mistake. Only one? I asked. She smiled faintly. The mistake was creating too much activity. What do you mean? Fraud is easier to prove when people leave records. She pointed toward the stack of documents we had brought. Phone logs. Security footage. Visitor records. Venue invoices. Those pieces don't exist by accident. She looked directly at me. If there's a financial motive, we'll find it. Within days, subpoenas were issued. Soren's attorney objected to nearly every request. But one request survived. His business emails. The first batch arrived 2 weeks later. Hundreds of messages. Invoices. Contracts. Investment proposals. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then Vivian noticed a folder with an ordinary name. Archive. Inside were dozens of deleted emails that had been recovered from the company's backup server. One message immediately caught her attention. The sender wasn't Soren. It was Owen Carlyle, the legal assistant from Hopper and Ellison. The subject line read, Transfer Schedule. Vivian opened it. Attached was a summary of my grandfather's estate timeline. Not the full documents. Just enough information to reveal one critical detail. Ownership would transfer after my marriage became legally effective. I felt my stomach tighten. Owen hadn't simply answered questions. He had leaked confidential information. Another email arrived 3 days later. This one was from Soren. If the transfer can be delayed, she'll negotiate before taking possession. Vivian printed the page. This is important. I nodded silently. Then she opened the next email. Neither of us expected what we found. The recipient wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a banker. It wasn't another family member. It was Soren's business partner, a man named Idris Norwood. The email contained one sentence. Keep enough pressure on her, and she'll sell the properties before she understands their real value. I stared at the screen. He never wanted the inheritance. Vivian looked at me. No. He wanted you to panic. And sell everything. Exactly. The commercial buildings my grandparents had left me were located in a district the city planned to redevelop. Publicly, they looked ordinary. Privately, investors knew the land value would soon increase dramatically. Soren already knew. If I inherited the buildings without understanding their future value, he believed I would accept a quick offer. He and Idris would buy them through shell companies. Then make millions. Everything suddenly fit together. The fake investment meeting. The missing family. The attempt to delay the transfer. The constant monitoring at the venue. It had never been about revenge. It had always been about money. But proving intent required more than suspicious emails. We needed someone who had participated. Someone willing to testify. We didn't have that person. At least, not yet. A month later, the opportunity arrived unexpectedly. Federal investigators opened an unrelated inquiry into one of Idris Norwood's companies for suspected financial reporting violations. His business accounts were frozen. His contracts began collapsing. Facing enormous legal pressure, Idris requested a meeting with prosecutors. In exchange for reduced penalties in his own case, he agreed to cooperate. Vivian called me the moment she learned the news. I think we've got him. The following afternoon, I sat inside a conference room while investigators played a recorded interview. Idris sounded exhausted. He admitted that Soren had approached him nearly a year before my wedding. The plan was simple. Delay my inheritance. Pressure me into selling. Purchase the properties through hidden investment groups before redevelopment became public knowledge. Then came the statement none of us expected. The wedding wasn't the original plan. I looked toward Vivian. She raised an eyebrow. The recording continued. Soren wanted to stop the engagement entirely. But when that failed, delaying the legal transfer became the next best option. I felt cold. The investigators asked him one final question. Why keep the entire family away from the ceremony? Idris answered, without hesitation. Because if they witnessed everything normally, they would immediately confirm the marriage timeline. The fewer close relatives present, the easier it would be to create confusion later. Silence filled the room after the recording ended. Vivian slowly closed her notebook. That's conspiracy. I nodded. And now we can prove it. Several months later, the civil trial began. For the first time since my wedding day, my entire family sat together again. This time, no chairs were empty. My parents looked devastated. My grandparents avoided looking at Soren altogether. Micah sat quietly beside me before the hearing started. I'm sorry. I squeezed his shoulder. I know. Across the courtroom, Soren entered wearing the same calm expression he always wore. As though nothing could touch him. As though every lie would somehow survive one more day. He couldn't have been more wrong. Because this time, the truth wasn't depending on memories. It was sitting inside court exhibits, security footage, financial records, sworn testimony, and his own emails. And before the trial ended, every single lie he had built over the past year was about to be read aloud in open court. The courtroom was silent when Soren finally took the witness stand. For the first time since my wedding day, he wasn't controlling the conversation. He couldn't interrupt. He couldn't redirect attention. He couldn't invent another emergency. All he could do was answer questions. His attorney began with simple ones. Did you care about your cousin? Of course. Did you intend to harm her? Absolutely not. He sounded confident. The same polished voice our family had trusted for years. Then Vivian stood. She carried only a thin folder. No dramatic gestures. No raised voice. Just facts. Mr. Vailcrest, did you organize a family investment meeting on the morning of Ms. Ricci's wedding? Yes. Did such a meeting actually exist? It was cancelled. Vivian placed an exhibit on the screen. The security footage from the vineyard. This video shows you at the wedding venue during the exact hours you claimed to be attending that meeting. Soren looked at the screen. He didn't answer. So I'll ask again. Were you attending an investment meeting? No. Were you at the wedding venue? Yes. The first crack appeared. Vivian moved to the next exhibit. Recovered emails. One after another. The jury watched as every message appeared on the large monitor. The leaked estate timeline. His discussions with Owen. His conversations with Idris. The plan to pressure me into selling the properties. Then Vivian displayed the sentence that had changed everything. If the transfer can be delayed, she'll negotiate before taking possession. She looked directly at Soren. Did you write this? He hesitated. Yes. The courtroom remained completely still. There was nothing left to explain away. No missing context. No misunderstanding. Only his own words. When Idris Norwood testified later that afternoon, he confirmed every detail. The fake investment meeting. The shell companies. The redevelopment plan. The strategy to isolate my family on my wedding day. He admitted his own role without trying to minimize it. I was greedy. He lowered his head. So was Soren. That single sentence carried more weight than any lawyer's argument. By the end of the week, the judge ruled against Soren on every major civil claim. The court found that he had intentionally interfered with my inheritance through fraud, conspiracy, and deceptive conduct. He was ordered to pay substantial financial damages. But the legal judgment wasn't the end of his problems. Harper and Ellison completed its internal investigation. Owen Carlyle admitted leaking confidential estate information in exchange for promises of future business opportunities. He lost his job. His professional certification was revoked. Separate legal action followed. Meanwhile, the financial investigation into Idris's companies uncovered additional violations unrelated to my case. He accepted responsibility and reached a settlement with prosecutors. Unlike Soren, he stopped pretending he had done nothing wrong. A few weeks after the verdict, another consequence arrived. News of the lawsuit spread quickly through Portland's business community. Clients who had trusted Soren's consulting firm began canceling contracts. Banks withdrew financing. Business partners walked away. Within months, his company shut down. He was eventually forced to sell his home, his office building, and nearly every investment he had spent years collecting. The man who tried to manipulate my inheritance lost almost everything he owned. As for me, the commercial properties officially transferred into my name without further challenges. After meeting with financial advisors and city planners, Graham and I made a decision that surprised almost everyone. We refused every offer to sell. Instead, we restored the aging buildings one by one. Old warehouses became affordable studios for artists and small businesses. Vacant offices became shared workspaces for local entrepreneurs. One building was converted into a non-profit training center for young architects starting their careers. Every time I walked through those renovated spaces, I thought about my grandfather. He hadn't left me wealth simply to become richer. He had left me responsibility. Months later, my parents asked if we could have dinner together. Just the four of us. Mom, Dad, Micah, and me. The conversation was awkward at first. Then my father looked directly at me. I failed you. I didn't interrupt. I believed someone else instead of trusting my own daughter. Tears filled my mother's eyes. There isn't a day that passes without me wishing I had walked into that vineyard. For the first time since the wedding, I believed their apology. Not because it erased what happened. Because it came without excuses. Forgiveness didn't happen overnight. Trust returned slowly. Phone call by phone call. Holiday by holiday. Choice by choice. Relationships, I learned, aren't repaired with words. They're repaired with consistency. A year after the trial, Graham surprised me. He took me back to the same vineyard where we had married. This time, there were no decorations. No guests. No photographers. Just the two of us standing beneath the same wooden arch. He smiled. Do you know what I remember about our wedding? I laughed softly. The empty chairs? He shook his head. I remember that you kept walking. I looked at him. You could have stopped. You could have fallen apart. But you didn't. He took my hand. You walked toward our future anyway. For the first time, I realized he was right. My wedding day had never been defined by the people who stayed away. It was defined by the person waiting for me at the end of the aisle. If there's one lesson I hope you take from my story, it's this. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from people you've trusted for years. But no matter how carefully someone plans a lie, the truth has a way of leaving footprints behind. Follow those footprints patiently, protect your integrity, and never let someone else's deception define the rest of your life. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of my story. If you enjoyed this emotional family drama and want to hear more stories filled with shocking twists, meaningful endings, and unforgettable characters, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and always pay attention to the people who show up when it truly matters.